Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Player with me, Matt Sparks. On today's show, we are taking a look at a mage deck. This was posted on Hearthstone.com by Fightup, and this is his Freeze Mage. Okay, so the Freeze Mage has been around for a little while, and a few people have played it. There's slight variations, but I think the deck is pretty much a standard kind of list of cards. Obviously some of those cards can be interchanged, but this is the deck that's been posted, so this is the one that I'm featuring. To begin with, this deck has a crafting cost of 7,320 dust. So let's start at the top and work our way down as we would normally do. Start off with 2 Ice Lance. This will freeze a character and not do any damage, but if the character is already frozen, then it'll do 4 damage to that character. This is quite nice. It can be used for a little bit of board control should you need to freeze something in place if you haven't got something in your hand already to be able to deal with it. And also, because this is a Freeze Mage deck, there's lots of other ways of being able to freeze opponents, and then you can use this to deal damage to them. This can also be used on the enemy hero themselves, so perhaps they have a weapon, you don't want them to use it against you, you can freeze them with an Ice Lance, or if they're already frozen, maybe with a Frostbolt, you can use Ice Lance to do 4 damage. Talking of Frostbolts, we have 2 of them, because what would a Freeze Mage be without 2 Frostbolts? Plus, it's a mage deck, and Frostbolts are amazing. And if you needed a little bit more spell damage, we have some spell damage and a little bit of card draw in the form of Blood Mage Thalnos, also at 2 mana. Doesn't do a lot of damage, so it can be gotten rid of fairly easily, but that's okay. Also at 2 mana we have 2 Doomsayers, because it's a Freeze Mage, and you will need Doomsayers to help keep your enemy's board under control. So the Doomsayer at the start of your turn destroy all minions, so that includes your own. Can't attack, so he's literally there to combo with the Frost Nova that we've got in the deck. Also at 2 mana we have a Loot Hoarder, 2 Loot Hoarders in fact, for a little bit more card draw. When you are starting your game and you want to decide what cards to keep for your mulligan, Loot Hoarders, one of the top priority. In fact, card draw in general is probably your top priority for your mulligan starting hands. You've got quite a lot of low cost kind of spells and creatures, but specifically you want Loot Hoarders, and the next one's the Mad Scientist. 2 for 2 on a death rattle, put a secret from your deck into the battlefield. You kind of want to get this guy out as soon as possible, so you want a mulligan for the Loot Hoarder, your Mad Scientists, because you've got a couple of secrets in this deck, because otherwise you probably wouldn't survive for very long. Also, card draw wise, we have 2 Arcane Intellect at 3 mana. So 3 mana, draw 2 cards. Try and get these as early as you can. You kind of want to try and keep decent sized hand as much as possible to give you as many options on dealing with your opponent as possible. Also at 3 mana, we have 2 Frost Novas. So these combo with the Doomsayers. Your opponent will put out whatever, a whole bunch of different things. Try and get the most value out of this if you can. So you might not necessarily want to just play your Frost Nova and Doomsayer on turn 5 if your opponent's only got 2 minions on the board. If he's really smart and he's figured out that you're playing a Freeze Mage, he might only play a maximum of 3 things on the board at any one time. At 3 mana, we have 2 Ice Barriers. This spell is one of the reasons you want your Mad Scientists out early. Getting that 8 armor early game can be a real nuisance for your opponent. And the other secret, also at 3 mana, is Ice Block. So when your hero takes fatal damage, prevent it and become immune for that turn. Also at 3 mana we have an Acolyte of Pain. We've only got the one. The Acolyte of Pain is quite good because obviously the card draw effect that he has on him, but you can ping him with your hero power, which will guarantee you at least 1 card draw, probably 2. If your opponent doesn't deal with it, then you could get a total of 3 cards from the Acolyte of Pain, which would be very, very nice indeed. Again, this is another one you want to try and get in your opening hand. So Loot Hoarders, Mad Scientist, Arcane Intellect, Acolyte of Pain. At 4 mana we have 2 Fireballs, because it's a mage deck and fireballs are awesome. I know it's a Freeze Mage deck, but fireballs do 6 damage for 4 mana, which is awesome. At 5 mana we have 1 Antique Healbot, so this will restore 8 health to your hero. Playing one of these early in the game, obviously not too early, because you want to try and make the most of that 8 health. So as soon as you get down to like 22 health or less, then Antique Healbot will be value. At 6 mana, we have 2 Blizzards, which deals 2 damage to all enemy minions and it freezes them, which is very nice. If you don't happen to have a Frost Nova in your hand, but you still have extra mana, then you can combo this with a Doomsayer, should you need to. Also at 6 mana we have an Emperor Thaurissan. Now this is why getting as many cards in your hand as possible is useful, because Emperor Thaurissan can reduce the cost of those cards. Emperor Thaurissan is usually a prime target, so if you've only got a few cards in your hand, unless you have literally nothing else to play, it's probably a bad idea to play him. If you've got 7, 8, maybe 9 cards in your hand, that is the perfect time to play Thaurissan, because then all of those cards have their mana cost reduced. At 7 mana, we have 1 Flame Strike, which does 4 damage to all enemy minions. If you're still having problems after Blizzards, Flame Strike is your next go-to for AoE board clear. Or maybe you've got to turn 9, you can Blood Mage Thalnos on use Flame Strike, and that will give you a 5 damage board clear, which is pretty cool. Also at 7 mana we have an Archmage Antonidas, so whenever you cast a spell, add a fireball spell to your hand. Now you've probably seen Archmage Antonidas in action in many other decks, and this is kind of why you want to try and get lots of cards in your hand and then have Emperor Thaurissan reduce the mana cost of those cards. Archmage Antonidas, as soon as you play him, your opponent's going to want to get rid of him, right? And obviously at 7 mana, it doesn't really give you a lot of leeway for doing much else that turn. But if you can reduce the mana cost of something so that it's either 0, like on an Ice Lance, or maybe a 1 mana Frostbolt, or even like a 2 mana Fireball, then it suddenly starts giving you a bit more to do. If you can reduce the cost of Archmage Antonidas as well with the Thaurissan, then that'll be even better. At 9 mana we have an Alexstrasza. So for example, you've played your Archmage Antonidas, you've played a couple of spells, you've got a couple of fireballs in your hand. Turn 9, you Alexstrasza your opponent, take them down to 15 health, and then if they don't get rid of Alexstrasza, then they're done. But if they don't get rid of Alexstrasza, you can then hit for 8, and then you've got 12 damage sitting in your hand in the form of 2 fireballs. So, you know, it's game over. Well, it doesn't even have to be fireballs. I mean, it could be a fireball, a couple of Frostbolts, and a couple of Ice Lances or something. But, you know, there's plenty of means to take out your opponent in one turn, basically. You have to set it up right. And then last but not least, a Pyroblast. 10 mana for 10 damage. Yes and no. I kind of like it. I think having 2 fireballs is better, because obviously 2 fireballs is 12 damage for 8 mana, which is much better value in my opinion. But it's there, it'll do 10 damage. I mean, if Alexstrasza doesn't get taken out after you play her and she's reduced your opponent's health to 15, you can hit with Alexstrasza and then Pyroblast and they're done. It might be nice to have something that's a cheaper mana cost that works with Archmage Antonidas better to get more fireballs from him, but obviously you can't guarantee that that's going to happen. So I guess Pyroblast kind of works out. And there is only 1, so it doesn't take up a huge amount of room in the deck. So that is the Freeze Mage. As per usual, there will be a link in the description which will take you to Hearthstone.com so you can check out the deck for yourself. I highly recommend that you do, because Fightup has put a lot of time and effort into writing up not just a mulligan guide, although I've kind of told you what you need to mulligan for, but also strategies against a whole bunch of different classes and deck types. And I really think if you want to try and give this deck a go, you should definitely go over there and read up on what he's put in the description for this deck, because it's really, really good. As I mentioned, the crafting cost is 7,320 dust. It's not too expensive. I mean, obviously, Alexstrasza and Archmage Antonidas and Blood Mage Thalnos are going to be the most difficult ones to craft. Emperor Thaurissan comes from the Blackrock Mountain expansion, so you don't need to worry about crafting him, you just need to have the Blackrock Mountain expansion and you'll be able to get him. If you play this deck, let me know how you get on. If you make any videos using this deck or something very, very similar, feel free to link them to me and I'll be sure to check them out. If you have any suggestions for any future decks for Big Deck Player, also again, feel free to link them to me and I'll be sure to take a look at them. Otherwise, I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Player. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.